The car that solved the wrong problem perfectly. It worked exactly as intended. Every system performed flawlessly. Every target was met, and that was the problem. Because in solving one problem with absolute precision, this car quietly ignored a far more important one, and the consequences rippled through the entire industry. To understand why this machine became a cautionary tale, we need to return to a moment of intense pressure. Regulations were tightening. Margins were shrinking. Public trust was fragile. Manufacturers searched desperately for measurable wins, clear targets they could optimize against. One problem rose above all others. Efficiency, not real-world efficiency, but test cycle efficiency. Numbers that could be proven, certified, and marketed. Engineers were given a singular mission: design a vehicle that would dominate the metrics regulators care about most. They accepted the challenge. The team stripped the problem down to its core. Aerodynamics were sculpted to perfection. Power delivery was tuned for laboratory conditions. Weight was shaved wherever rules allowed. Software was calibrated to recognize testing scenarios and behave accordingly. Nothing illegal, nothing hidden, just relentless optimization. The result was extraordinary. The car shattered benchmarks. Certification results stunned competitors. Headlines praised the engineering brilliance. Internally, the project was celebrated as a masterclass in focus. The problem had been solved perfectly, but outside the test environment, something felt off. Drivers noticed it first. The car behaved differently on real roads. Efficiency gains evaporated under normal use. Acceleration felt restrained. Throttle response hesitated. The machine seemed optimized for a world that didn't exist. Engineers saw the data and understood immediately what had happened. The car hadn't failed. It had succeeded at the wrong objective. By designing for the test instead of the experience, they had built a machine that excelled where measurement ended and faltered where life began. Every compromise made sense in isolation. Together, they created a disconnect no amount of calibration could erase. Still, leadership hesitated to intervene. The numbers were undeniable. The success was public. Walking back felt impossible. And so the car entered the world carrying a quiet contradiction, celebrated as a triumph of engineering, while unknowingly exposing a flaw in how problems were chosen in the first place. A flaw that would soon force the industry to confront a question it had avoided for far too long. What happens when you solve the wrong problem perfectly? The contradiction deepened as the car reached wider audiences. Owners drove it in traffic, on highways, through heat-cold hills and imperfect roads. And slowly, the illusion created in controlled conditions began to unravel. Real-world efficiency varied wildly. Some drivers reported impressive numbers. Others saw results barely better than the models this car was meant to replace. The difference wasn't driving style alone. It was context. The vehicle excelled when conditions matched its assumptions and stumbled when they didn't. Engineers analyzed the feedback carefully. The data told a clear story. The car's systems were not broken. They were narrowly optimized. Power delivery favored specific load windows. Aerodynamic gains depended on steady speeds rarely sustained outside testing cycles. Energy recovery behaved brilliantly in predictable patterns and inefficiently everywhere else. The machine was behaving exactly as designed. That realization was uncomfortable because it meant the flaw wasn't execution. It was intent. The project had been guided by a single measurable objective. Everything else, comfort, responsiveness, adaptability, had been treated as secondary. Engineers hadn't been careless. They had been obedient. They solved the problem they were given with ruthless precision. But markets don't live inside spreadsheets. Drivers complained that the car felt lifeless. Not slow, but restrained. Not unreliable, but uninspiring. Reviews struggled to reconcile certification success with emotional disappointment. The car did nothing wrong, yet failed to connect. Inside the company, tension grew. Marketing doubled down on numbers. Advertising highlighted charts, rankings, and compliance victories. Engineers quietly worried that the more the car was explained, the less it was understood. Each defense only reinforced the sense that something fundamental had been missed. Competitors watched closely. Some mocked the car's real-world performance. Others quietly copied its testing strategies, recognizing the advantage of optimizing for metrics rather than meaning. The industry began shifting its behavior, not toward better vehicles, but toward better scores. And that shift was dangerous, because once success is defined by the test becomes a product. Innovation narrows. Creativity bends toward compliance. Engineers stop asking what people need and start asking what regulators measure. The car had become more than a product. It was a mirror, reflecting how an entire industry had learned to mistake measurable success for meaningful progress. And as the consequences spread beyond one model, it became clear that solving the wrong problem perfectly doesn't just disappoint customers. It reshapes priorities in ways that are very hard to undo. The long-term effects unfolded quietly, hidden beneath respectable sales figures and impressive certification records. On paper, the car succeeded. In reality, it changed behavior in ways no one had intended. Engineering teams across the industry began adjusting their priorities. Projects were framed around compliance targets first, experience second. Design reviews shifted from asking how a car felt to how it scored. Creativity narrowed into optimization. Risk-taking gave way to precision gaming. The car had proven something unsettling. You didn't need to build a better vehicle. You needed to build a better answer sheet. Inside the company, veteran engineers pushed back. They warned that the gap between measured success and lived experience was widening. That customers were losing trust not because cars were worse, but because promises were becoming abstract. Efficiency numbers felt detached from daily life. Progress felt theoretical. Their warnings struggled to gain traction. The car was profitable. Regulators were satisfied. Awards continued to arrive. From a business perspective, the model worked. And when something works, questioning it feels unnecessary until the cost becomes visible. That cost appeared in subtle ways. Brand loyalty weakened. Owners didn't return with enthusiasm. Conversations shifted from pride to justification. The car wasn't loved. It was defended. And nothing erodes confidence faster than the need to explain why something should feel good. Meanwhile, regulators noticed patterns they hadn't expected. As more vehicles optimized aggressively for test cycles, real-world emissions and consumption diverged from projections. The gap wasn't fraud. It was alignment. Companies solving exactly what was asked. New rules followed. More complex tests, broader conditions, harder metrics. And with each new layer, vehicles grew more complicated, more constrained, and less adaptable. The cycle fed itself. Cars became better at passing tests, and worse at belonging to people's lives. The original car sat at the center of this shift, not as a villain, but as a catalyst. It hadn't broken trust intentionally. It had exposed a flaw in how success was defined. The engineers who built it understood the irony too late. They had delivered excellence within boundaries that should never have existed. And now the industry faced a dilemma it could no longer avoid. Do you continue refining answers to the wrong question? Or do you step back and risk redefining what success actually means? The answer would not come easily, because once an entire system rewards a wrong outcome, changing the question be the reckoning didn't arrive with scandal or collapse. It arrived with fatigue. Customers grew tired of explanations. Engineers grew tired of optimization without meaning. Regulators grew tired of chasing numbers that never quite matched reality. Change came slowly but decisively. Testing protocols evolved. Metrics expanded. Real-world usage gained weight. Suddenly, the skills that once dominated development lost their advantage. Cars optimized narrowly struggled. Those built with broader balance adapted. The car that solved the wrong problem perfectly became a reference point, a quiet warning studied in engineering meetings and policy discussions. Not as a failure, but as a lesson, a reminder that precision without perspective can mislead even the smartest teams. Inside the company, philosophies shifted. Future projects began with different questions. Not how to maximize a number, but how to serve a person. Not how to pass a test, but how to age gracefully. Engineers were encouraged to challenge objectives, not just execute them. The original car remained on the road, still efficient, still compliant, still impressive on paper. But its legacy lived elsewhere, in how problems were framed afterward. It taught the industry that optimization is powerful, but only when aimed correctly, that solving a problem flawlessly is meaningless if the problem itself is misaligned with reality. And perhaps most importantly, it reminded everyone involved that engineering is not just about answering questions. It's about choosing the right ones. Because when you solve the wrong problem perfectly, you don't just miss the mark, you redefine it. So, what do you think? Are we measuring the things that actually matter? Subscribe to join the journey. The call